Sorry, bud, but let's face it, your maps just, they aren't what they could be. You've been hacking away at these things, you've been trying to make them fit your web application or your academic paper, whatever you're making your maps for, send it over to your boss, and you finished all this work and you look at it and you're like, "Ugh, my maps kind of suck." Well, I'm here to help you out. I'm here to tell you, yes, your maps do kind of suck, but there's something you can do about it. So we're going to go over 5 reasons why your maps probably suck and what you can do to make this a lot better. First of all, you probably are caught up in trying to make something impressive. If you're new to mapping, if you haven't been doing this a long time, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can throw into your map. You can throw in all kinds of special labels and cool colors and a little legend that says legend down in the corner and toggles and all kinds of other little shapes and icons and stuff. And it just ends up being like not that valuable to people. People don't really need to see how great a map maker you are. They need to see the point of your map very quickly. So if there's stuff in there that is really just about you, not about your audience, not about the point you're trying to make, but kind of showing off because you thought it was a cool thing to put in and maybe it was hard to make, try axing it, try taking it out. Is anything actually lost? Is an actual person that uses your map actually going to have less that they're able to do because of it? Cut the fat out, cut out the stuff that makes you look good just because it makes you look good and isn't the main point of the map. And that's getting into the second reason, which is really, what are you trying to do with your map? A really common thing that happens is people end up putting in a whole bunch of other functionality that other people are doing better on other maps just because your idea seems too small to you. It seems too insignificant. Don't you need to show a bunch of other information? So I see this all the time with apps like, let's say there's a real estate website and they're showing properties. And of course, people are coming to the map because they want to be able to quickly find properties and look at the prices and stuff like that. And for some reason, they include a directions input so that you can put in where you live and you can put in the address and it'll show you the directions. Why are you doing this? Isn't this much better done by Google? Isn't this much better done by Bing or whoever the hell your users would rather use for directions? Just put a link to the directions. You don't need to try to put that in your app. If you're trying to put something that you just found somewhere else, some cool visualization, some cool layer that you found on some site that isn't really about the main thing that you're doing, don't include it. It's just extra clutter and it's not really what your map is about. Even if what you're doing is really small and it seems insignificant to you, that's okay. That's the point of your map. No one is going to start using your map for directions or to find out where someone lives or whatever. They are going to use your map just for the point that you have it made for. So if you're showing climate science, you don't necessarily need to show all the roads and all the city names and make them styled really nice. You just need to show the data that you're trying to show and make it clear what it's about. So nail down what makes your map, and again, cut out all that other stuff that's in there because you're just trying to make it more useful to people. And from that, we come to the crux, number 3. The real center of any map is that you're not just making a map, you're telling a story. And you really got to figure out what is that story. Because if it's unclear to you, if you're not sure what the point is of you making this map and it's just kind of there because you decided to put it there, then your map is going to probably end up cluttered, confusing, way too much data on it or nothing on it. And it's just going to end up being a meaningless thing. Now, if the point of your map is to just have a pretty little map, that's totally cool. But then that's the point. You don't need to add anything else. You don't need to add direction searching or a bunch of markers on it or whatever. Just a beautiful little map that sits in the background of your page. That's perfect. It's telling a story that your website or your app or whatever is beautiful and usable. That's totally cool. If you're making an app that, again, is like climate science, you're probably trying to tell a very specific story with your data. Hone in on that. You probably, a really common thing I see with maps from scientists is they have so many options in the side. And that's because they're scientists. They love digging into all the details. And that's a really great map to make for other scientists. But if you're trying to make it for the public, it's too hard a story. The story is like reading a whole academic paper, and the public just isn't really used to that. You need to get the point across right away. You need to hone in on what's the point of this map? What am I telling with my data? If you're making a presentation for something at work where you got analytics and you're trying to show sales in different parts of your country or whatever, you got to make your map focus on that. You got to get rid of all the extra labels, all the other garbage that's on there, because it's not important for the story. The story should be knowable right away. It shouldn't be this struggle to look at the map and try to understand what's going on and, oh, isn't it cool because it's a globe? Well, that doesn't matter if it's not part of the story that you're telling. So hone in on the story. I couldn't give better advice than that. Cut everything else out and really focus, what is my map doing? How do I tell that story the best way I possibly can? Next up, number 4, is that you didn't really think about real users. You thought about people that are pretty much using your map exactly the way you're looking at it. So this really applies very strongly to people who are doing this in a programming way with apps or websites especially. Developers, we like to say mobile first, but we don't really develop for mobile first most of the time. We end up developing on our laptops or our desktops, and then we just kind of try to scale it down to fit. So that can work with a fair bit of stuff. There's a lot of CSS frameworks to make that easy. That doesn't really work with maps, especially if your map is complicated and has toggles or options. You really need to look very carefully at how actual real people are going to be loading this map, how they're going to run into it as they scroll through a screen. Are they going to get stuck in it because the scrolling zooms in and out? And so as they're scrolling down the page, they're suddenly stuck on this map and they have to figure out how to get past it. That's not good. Or when they load the map in their mobile, is there only this much of the map actually visible because there's all these other options? You really got to look at actual users. Get some people you know to use it in front of you. Prepare to cringe at yourself as they break it and use it badly and get confused and throw weird suggestions at you that you never thought about. That's exactly what you need to hear, because if your map isn't good, it's because real people aren't using it how you were imagining when you were developing. So make sure you get some real people to test it, or at least come at it yourself from the perspective of someone who's just using this for the first time, landing on this page, using your mobile, using whatever, and try to see if you can get the point right away. And 5th, and it's kind of been talked about a little bit in the previous 4, but I really want to reiterate it because it's something I've done and it's something that map makers are doing all the time, is putting too much data, too many options, too much clutter on your map. So academic maps are a little better at this actually, because you often are including a map just in a part of a paper that you're writing, and there's really one point. You just want to show a region, or you want to show a mountain range, or show some hydrology or something like that. And so you're just showing that, and you don't have a bunch of other stuff. There's not the rest of the world available and tons of other points that are irrelevant. So academic maps tend to be a little better at this, and this might be because they're trying to make an argument. And so they end up leaving out all the extra clutter. The thing that happens with us web map developers, or if we're making it for applications, is we throw in, there's so much stuff, there's so much data. Think about a map just as you land on it that has none of your custom data on it. There's already, you got to deal with land masses. The user has to figure out, where am I looking at on the surface of the earth? You got to see streets, you see street names. Sometimes you see interstate shields with what highway is that? You see cities, you see country boundaries, you see state boundaries, you sometimes see town boundaries. There's all this stuff already on there. And if it's a satellite map, well, you're already trying to make sense of all these colors and what do all the different things mean? Is this a picture of mountains, or is that a desert? Where is this? And then it's so much to already deal with just having a map just by itself in its kind of default state. Think about that when you think about putting your data on top of all that. You got to get rid of a lot of that clutter that's not really necessary. Maybe have some options for turning that back on that are kind of hidden away somewhere into some sub-toggle that if someone's a real nerd about your map, they can find, but you don't need to make it front and center. And that goes for most options on your map. Really, you should only have a couple of options that are really obvious on your map. One selector, one search bar, whatever, maybe 2. Because if you put more, it's just going to be overwhelming and people aren't going to want to use them all unless they're highly motivated to do so, like they're using it because they have to use it for work or something like that. But if you're trying to hit the public, no, you got to keep it simple. You got to cut out all this extra detail that's confusing to people. so that people who aren't necessarily map makers and aren't motivated can see your map and get the point right away, what you're trying to get across. I ran into this a lot with my native land map, which is a really complicated map. There's so many polygons and shapes and colors and crazy stuff everywhere, and it's the earth and you're zoomed way out and there's a globe and it's so much. And so I really had to focus on the story. The story is that I'm trying to tell this story of diversity, of history, of the complexity of, indigenous nations all across the world. And so actually the clutter is part of the story in that case. And cutting out all the other stuff you don't need to see, all the other options that I want to put in there and make front and center, I just ended up cutting them out over the years, and it made the map stronger. People got the point sooner. So cut out clutter, figure out your story, get rid of stuff that you're doing that you're not the best at doing, that isn't the center of your story, and make sure you actually see some real users using it. As hard as that is, you really got to do it. And after all that, I bet your maps aren't going to suck as much as they already do. So you're going to make your maps way better. I'd love to see your maps if you want to leave them in the comments. If you want to share some of your projects, I'm sure I'm not the only person that would love to see it. So let's see your projects, hear how you made your map better, and we'll see you next time.